Before we get into our personal growth, how we're going to grow throughout the year, how is Australia going to grow? Joining us in the studio, I'm really pleased to say, a very special guest, New South Wales Senator Sam Dastyari. He wants to see a big Australia. He wants much more immigration, and he's going to tell us why in just a few moments.
Do you think you'll mind if I argue with him? Because I'd like to see us have a smaller Australia.
Sam would love you to argue. More importantly, Sam would also like anyone out there. He represents everybody in New South Wales. So here's your chance to speak to your Senator, Sam Dastyari. Get on 13 13 32 or SMS 19 954 954. Speak directly to Sam about plans for a big Australia. Do you want to see it or do you not?
That's a great idea. In fact, that's the best thing about radio, because we really want to hear your view here. It's, you know, Rowan and I could gibber about this and that, but the main thing is you. We're here for you. If you'd like to call in and you've got a view about immigration, should we have more of it, less of it? What's the ideal population for Australia? Well, the expert's going to be in the studio in just a second, and you could get on the blower and have your say. Bigger or smaller, argue the toss. 13 13 32. The SMSs, as Rowan said, 19 954 954, and your emails via the web, 2ue.com.au.
Taking you wherever, whenever it happens. You're listening to Sydney's 2UE.
It's Sunday, the 5th of January, and we're having a little debate about the weather earlier on, and it certainly does seem to have closed in, but I remain hopeful. Now, we are going to be joined by Sam Dastyari in just a second. What is this thing about Vodafone? Just briefly, tell me this thing about Vodafone.
There's an Egyptian ad which has caused all sorts of stirs. It's a Muppet. It's like a puppet, a Muppet.
Jim Henson, eat your heart out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in Egypt, they're convinced, or some characters convinced, that it's actually got a secret code within the ad calling for terrorists to overthrow the government or something or other.
These are the same people who thought we didn't go to the moon?
But I've got the ad for you. We'll look at that much later in the program.
All right, fair. I don't know. That's up there with the government's controlling our mind with fluoride in the water, and we didn't go to the moon. Let's find out what's really the case, though. Is the Muppet controlling our minds? 13 13 32. Rowan, a special guest in the studio.
Yep, exactly. Now, Sam, welcome to 2UE. Sam, I'm really pleased to have you here. You were born in an Iranian fishing village, correct?
Yep.
You came here aged 5. You're the typical Australian great immigration story. Your parents were student activists in the 1979 Iranian Revolution. You've come here, you've been politically very active yourself since the tender age of 16 when you joined Young Labor. You've risen right up through the ranks. You are now a New South Wales Senator. Welcome, Sam, and congratulations on your maiden speech and appointment to the Senate.
Great to be here.
And now, how big, let's cut to the chase, you made this the subject of your maiden speech and you've written a big article on it. You believe Australia should be a much bigger nation. We are a continent with only a tiny population. We tend to freak out about so-called illegal immigrants, but we're a nation built on immigration. How big should Australia be?
Well, a couple of points. I think firstly, the success of Australia as a nation has been our ability to embrace immigrants, not our ability to reject them. You know, 24% of the people that live in this country weren't born here. I'm part of that 24%. I came here as a 5-year-old during the Iran-Iraq War. My parents and myself, as when we were quite young, fled Iran during that war and came to Australia. I think that there's some figures that have been banting around. The reality is that we're actually at the moment, according to our own Bureau of Statistics, we're heading to a population of 48.3 million by 2061. That's right. The ABS's own stats.
So that's roughly double.
That's roughly double. Population's about 23 million at the moment. Figures of around 35 million by 2050 have been kind of bantied around. My argument's this. Firstly, we should be a big Australia. We should embrace a big Australia. And secondly, we actually have to start planning some policy around it. We're headed towards a big Australia. Look, everyone in Australian politics is petrified about talking about immigration. Everyone's scared of it.
Sure, it's a hot topic, right? Well, melts the phones down.
Well, yeah, it is a hot topic. And, it's not just and part of the big problem is our entire immigration debate has now been dominated by talking about asylum seekers and refugees. Really, it's kind of taken, which is actually a really small part of it. I mean, look, people are going to have different views on asylum seekers. Coming from a war and having fled Iran, I have a obviously more sympathetic view on the whole asylum debate than other people do. That's my life experience. People who have cancer in the family have stronger views on those issues. It's just the experiences shape you. But our immigration debate in this country is appallingly bad. We're heading towards a big Australia. I think that's a good thing, but no one is planning for it because everybody's too afraid.
And Sam, you've taken on a big issue, because even within the Labor Party, we had Julia Gillard saying when she was Prime Minister, sorry, we're full, I don't want to see a big Australia. We had Bob Carr when he was Premier of New South Wales for 10 years saying, sorry, Sydney's full, no more people. The Labor Party introduced the sort of clamped down on 457 visas, which was skilled migration being stopped. The unions don't like it. The Weekend Australian, where your piece was run about immigration, they editorialised on it and said, we applaud Sam Dastyari for taking on this issue, but it's a big surprise coming from the Labor and from a man who's much of his career has been with the unions.
Yeah, look, I mean, everybody's, and this is the big problem, is that everyone's kind of afraid. Look, this country and this amazing nation, and, is so poorly served by its political debate. You look at the UK, you look at America, you even look at New Zealand. You've got politicians there that are prepared to have big debates, big issues. Here in Australia, everything we talk about, our debate is so narrow. Everyone in politics is so scared. Everyone runs petrified about saying anything that's controversial. And what's happened is, you've got this political correctness that I think has happened in our political debate as well, where people are afraid to say, look, here's a different idea, here's a different view, here's something that's from, left of centre or right from centre, here's something outside the political mainstream, let's talk about something different. And everyone starts running scared.
And I think that's fantastic.
Because politics isn't all about political debate, right? Politics at its core is about fixing the joint up, making Australia better for all of us, as opposed to scoring political points. So we're going to take a break in just a second, but what's your ideal number, say, by 2050? What would you see as an ideal result?
I think the number that we've been talking about, around a 35 million figure by 2050, is a reasonable kind of direction for us to be heading in. Now, that'll change, 5-10 years down the path, things will be different. But I think that's the kind of number we should be looking at if you want to put a number on it.
And planning for. So if you've got a view on that, and our population growth is a central issue, immigration's a touchy subject for many people, and they don't appreciate the difference between asylum seeking and immigration. They're two different things, and asylum seekers get the limelight, but as everyone said this morning, Australia is founded on immigration. What's the ideal population target for Australia? Do you agree we need to get bigger, or are we just going to run out of arable land? Have your say on the radio, 13 13 32.
You're on 2UE 954, and we're with Senator Sam Dastyari. Sam has caused quite a stir by pointing out that Australia should be a big Australia. In his opinion, his maiden speech to the Senate was that we need to broaden the debate and that both sides of politics need to get away from the stifling, narrow debate that we've had about asylum seekers and look at immigration in a big way.
I'm pretty sure there's a lot of interest in this topic, given the way the switchboard melted down just then.
Sam,
Colleen, g'day.
Oh, good morning.
What would you like to say?
Well, I would like... Oh, excuse my voice. Instead of looking for what you call quantity, why don't we look at quantity? We look at quality. In other words, the type of migrant we get here. And look, I've got friends of many ethnicities, and they are disgusted at what's happening to Australia because just about anybody who wants to come here can come here. And we also have friends, or friends of friends, who've been here 30 years and have never bothered to learn the language.
Oh,
Sam.
That's a fair enough point.
Well, Colin, you're partly right, and I partly agree with you, and I partly don't. The idea about quality, you're completely right about. I mean, you have to be getting the right type of people to come to this country. We're quite lucky here. We can attract the best and the brightest around the world. I've said this before, but every Harry Triguboff or Frank Lowy that we bring to Australia is as good as bringing a Ford or a Holden. You want to be bringing the right type of people who can invest, who are able to help grow our country. But on the question of quantity, I mean, look, we have an ageing population. The reality is that by 2050, half the Australian population is going to be over 65. And if we're actually going to have the kind of society we have now, a pension system like the one we have now, where people can retire and when and can be supported, then you have to be bringing in a whole lot of new migrants and a whole lot of new people because, the birth rate is so low in this country. So part of the challenge is you're right about quality. You want to be bringing the right people to this country, and you want to be bringing people who are going to invest, who are going to work, who are going to create jobs. We're so lucky here that all these people from around the world want to come here. But you actually have to be looking at the quantity of people you're coming to if you're going to be replacing and dealing with this whole issue of an ageing population. Now, this idea that anyone who wants to come to this country can come to this country is just not right. Coming to Australia is incredibly difficult. Now, that's not a bad thing. But allows us to be very selective about who we bring here. But really, to give you a bit of figures, last year there was about 95,000 people that were brought here as kind of permanent migrants. Now, that's about, 1 in 30 people who apply to come to this country and want to come to this country. So the idea that anyone can come here is just not right.
So, Sam, how do we guarantee this kind of selective quality? Because what we've seen in Europe over the past decade, really, particularly at the moment in Britain and in Scandinavian countries, there's a lot of social unrest where they haven't had a selective sort of process. So just like it's a free-for-all, anyone can come in. It's got so bad in London that there's horrible things like exclusion zones for certain types of people not near public monuments and stuff. How do we avoid those sorts of problems?
What they did wrong, and this is where Europe got it wrong, was the Europeans turned around and said, as part of the kind of free trade, the Eurozone, we're going to have open borders, and anyone who wants to come can come to the country, rather than saying, right, we want growth and we want to be able to bring in the right type of people. I completely disagree and don't support the idea of an open policy, and I don't support the idea of having, the equivalent of a free trade agreement when it comes to migration, where people from certain countries can all come here. I think that doesn't work, and I think we have to be careful about that. But look, we can select. We can select who comes to this country. It's easy for us to do. And the fact is, we're actually doing it right now.
We've got a whole immigration department.
That's right. That's
a federal immigration department devoted to selecting who comes here.
But isn't the issue with boat people that fundamentally Australians do support immigration, they don't support uncontrolled immigration, and they get very angry when the so-called jumping the queue, which suggests to people that we don't control our immigration. But isn't that at the heart of the boat people issue?
Yeah, look, there's always been this fear when it comes to immigration in this country. And there's been this kind of sense, and at different times it's kind of swayed back and forth, this idea that we're an incredibly lucky nation, we're down here, we're, at the bottom of Asia, and there's always been a sense of, a bit of fear that's manifested itself in different ways, Once upon a time it was about the Yellow Peril and this and that. Now sometimes, that debate has kind of changed. But yeah, look, people are rightly worried about free-for-all when it comes to immigration. Now, I think the whole refugee debate here is a joke.
Yeah,
I think we've messed it up. And the reason why we messed it up, we're in a country here where we're so unable to talk about immigration or about refugees. Their entire refugee policy at the moment by the current government is we're not going to talk about it. Once a week, we're going to have a briefing and we're going to tell you what's happening with boat people, arrivals and this and that, and that's it. That's kind of where the debate is, because everyone's so scared to talk about it. Now, the reality is...
broadening...
On the issue of who comes here and who doesn't, let's talk to Anne. G'day, Anne.
Oh, hi. Look, yes, I heard that young man. Look, I'm an Australian, 80 years old, born and bred. I've seen the terrible change that has come over this country. I would close the doors straight away to Muslims. I am concerned about the people coming in on the boats that are Muslims. This chap's saying, bring them all in. We have to keep a close eye on this.
Anne, hang on a minute. Have you ever had any dealings with Muslim people on a one-on-one basis? Because Muslims get a bad rap. Most of them are just people like you and me trying to get on with their jobs.
Look, I don't doubt that. But because of the violence and the criminal activities that are in our media that we are made aware of every day.
And there are more violent Christians in Australia than there are violent Muslims. It's an unpalatable fact for you, perhaps, but that's how it is.
Thank you, Anne, for those comments. And it goes to the heart of how we choose which people come into the country. And Sam, who is a young man, you're right, but he's also a New South Wales senator and in a powerful position to determine our future. Sam, the other big issue to do with immigration comes down to infrastructure. Now, you need to build the infrastructure before the people come. We had a Labor New South Wales government for 16 years. It didn't build the infrastructure. We had the last 6 years, we haven't really seen the infrastructure. Surely that's part of the problem, that we need to build the infrastructure in anticipation rather than after the event.
Look, there is a massive investment problem in Sydney in particular, but also, Melbourne, Brisbane, all that kind of capital cities when it comes to infrastructure investment. I mean, this is a huge problem. And, if you look at the current statistics where we're heading, actually, Melbourne's going to be bigger than Sydney by 2060. I mean, they're not my statistics. Yeah. They're just where, things are heading at the moment. That's according to the Bureau of Statistics. The infrastructure problem is linked and separate, and this is what I mean, right? We here in this country are not spending anywhere near enough on infrastructure investment. And the truth is that we're trying to have our cake and eat it too. We're not spending in infrastructure and we're not prepared to pay for it. So there's this kind of myth that's going around at the moment, and at the heart of it, it's a bit of a lie. And this is what I talk about how badly we're treated by our politicians in this country, right? There's this lie out there that we tell the Australian people which says, we're going to be able to get all this great infrastructure, but no one's going to have to pay for it. That just by rejigging things a little bit, you're going to get better roads, better infrastructure, better transport. Now, the reality is, right, we're going to have to find a way to pay for this.
Yes.
And, you've got...
And we don't want our kids paying for it.
Yeah, and you've got Liberal state governments, in some places are saying, look, maybe it's the GST, maybe it's I don't know what the answer is, but what I know is this, right, that you've got two separate problems. One, you've got an ageing population, which means you have to bring people in if you want to keep our quality of life. And on the other hand, you've got this transport infrastructure problem. And, firstly, the question is, how do you get people out of the major cities? And there's ways of doing this. The immigration examples in places like Orange, Bathurst, a few other places have been really, really effective. There's this whole separate argument that says, well, there's actually room for another big city in this country, probably up north somewhere. Mm-hmm. You look at the Pilbara, this and that. There's no reason why the Pilbara can't be the next Darwin, the next Perth, the next Adelaide.
No, look, I agree with you on that. I also think that we that nobody in their right mind would disagree that we have an infrastructure problem, but it's like the second step in the equation to getting more people here. And the first step, surely it's resources. And I think Jan's got a problem to make about resources. G'day, Jan.
Yes, that was an excellent segue. My problem, when you were talking earlier about immigration, you were putting the cart before the horse. You were talking about how to select migrants, but I don't want migrants to be selected. And Sam, I know that you've got the migration on the mind, as you said earlier, but we have a huge water problem. It wasn't just Sydney that almost ran out of water. It was, I think, most of the other capital cities. And it wasn't a shortage of water. It was because the governments, I think specifically Labor, but maybe of both political persuasions, they don't want to build dams.
That's an excellent point, Jan. What do you say, Sam?
Yeah, they don't. And there's this real fear of actually investing in it. And look, to take a quick step back, here's the problem, right? And this is the problem with politics here, right? No one talks long-term and no one talks big. So if you're a politician right now, you don't say, and the point that you're talking about, which is right, is things like dams, things about long-term infrastructure, right? No one gets votes today for building a dam. You just don't, right? This is stuff that takes a long time, don't come quickly, and part of the problem you've got here, and part of the problem with the debate in this country, is that everything is done on this very short election period. So right now, you've got a federal Abbott government that's just come in as a state Liberal government here in New South Wales, pretty much state Liberal governments across the board. There's one or two Labor administrations, and they're thinking about the next election, and part of thinking about the next election means not thinking about long-term investment and not thinking about long-term infrastructure. These things take a long time to build. They pay long-term dividends. Now, this issue about resource, look, of course we got plenty of resources in this country. It can be managed better, it can be invested in better, but what we have to do is demand from our politicians and people like myself and others that you actually start talking and thinking long-term about these things, because they don't. I mean, look, I sit in the Senate, I've seen the political debate in this country, it's shocking. Everything's about the next news poll, which comes out every kind of 2 weeks. It's about the next election that's only ever 2 or 3 years away. And people aren't doing what you're talking about there, and that is saying, okay, what are the long-term needs of this country? Now, we've got a long-term water problem, a long-term transport problem, a long-term ageing population problem, which is going to explode. It's just going to explode as an issue.
Yeah, so the bottom line there is, let's try and frame the debate not in terms of who can make political capital off whom, but in terms of getting the job done and making Australia a better place for all of us to live in, and particularly for our children to live in. If you've got a view about that, get on the phone now. Give us a call, 13 13 32. I'd love to hear what you think on the issue of immigration and resources and, you know, infrastructure, all of that stuff. It's vital to the health of our city and our nation.
This is 2UE954 and you're with Rowan Dean and John Cadogan. And our phones have gone into meltdown because we are talking to New South Wales Labor Senator Sam Dastyari, and Sam has rightly pointed out that both sides of politics, Liberal and Labor, have failed, his own party and the government have failed to really get to grips with the concept of a bigger Australia and what immigration. Let's not talk about boats, let's talk about immigration and the future of Australia. Anthony in Kenthurst is on the phone. Anthony, give us your thoughts and speak to Senator Dastyari.
Well, Rowan, I travel overseas every winter. We go for 3 months. We go to Europe and the US every year.
Yep.
Every country you go to in the Western world, there is a problem with Muslims. None of them have assimilated. There's always problems. In Holland, for example, it's so bad that there's whole towns that the police will not go to. If they need to go in, they have to send the army because it's completely out of control. They're bringing in Sharia law. They're trying to bring in Sharia law into London. When you go to Australia, go to Sydney, there's whole areas that you simply would not go. It's very dangerous. If you look at the crime, when they say that it's very good for the economy, the fact is that with these refugees, after 5 years, a lot of them are unemployed up to about 90%. And you can't argue that's good for the economy. It's a drain. We're paying all this welfare, all this free
I think, Anthony, the welfare issue is a very important one. Sam Dastyari.
Yeah, look, a couple of points on that. I beg to disagree a bit on some of what you said about there are parts of Sydney that you wouldn't want to go to. I think some of the really kind of ethnically diverse parts of Sydney are some of the most exciting parts of Sydney. But look,
exciting in a good way or a bad way?
Yeah, I think in a good way. I mean, look, you go to Southwest Sydney, you go to Granville, you go to Auburn, you go to the kind of Fairfield. But look,
you get a mean falafel in Bankstown.
Well, you get a mean falafel anyway. But look, this is part of the great thing about this country. And what's really worked here, and you're right about how much everyone else has failed around the world when it comes to immigration. Where we've been successful largely is this idea of multiculturalism. And I know sometimes multiculturalism comes in and out of vogue, but the idea of multiculturalism in the Australian example is this. We can have people come here from all over the world. They can bring with them their own cultures, their own structure, but at the same time also be Australian. And I think we've benefited a lot as a nation from having waves of migrants of, there was the Italians, there was the Irish, there was the Greeks. In the 80s, there was the, booming Asian population. And yeah, look, I mean, people are pointing out that seems to be more migration from places like Africa and the Middle East and that. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that every generation has to tackle its challenges. But the point that the caller made, which I think is actually partly right, is this idea that, okay, if you are bringing people in around the world, and we always have as a country, it's not, for the past 200 years we've been bringing in different waves of people. The question is, how do you get them to assimilate? How do you get them to participate? How do you get them to be included in Australian society? And so far, unlike most places around the world, we've been really effective in doing that. But we've been effective in doing it because we've been prepared to talk about it. I think things like this, Sean, what's so important is you have to be able to talk about immigration.
I think you're absolutely right, Sam. And the issue of welfare has been a big issue in the UK, where they believe a lot of the immigrants have come simply to soak up the free National Health Service or what would be Medicare.
Yeah.
Here. So how do you stop welfare, Medicare, etc., being abused?
Look, I think a lot of that has to do with who you're bringing here and about how you deal with things like skilled migration. I mean, let's just talk about because a couple of people have raised this, the kind of London example. Here's what happened in London, right? When they came part of the EU, one of the EU decisions was they were going to effectively have it. It's more complex than this, but just to really simplify it, we're going to have open borders within the European Union, and anyone can travel through and without the European Union. And so what you had was a lot of Eastern Europeans come to London because of job opportunities, work opportunities, effectively as much as you can get an open door kind of system. Now, I think that would be terrible for Australia, don't get me wrong. I think if you turned around and said, right, we're going to allow anyone to come here whenever they want to come here, and we're going to have some kind of an open door policy up north, I think you're going to get, a flood of people coming in. That's not good. But if you turn around and increase some of the programs we have, right, which says, okay, how do we get skilled people? How do we get a lot of Chinese and Asian investment dollars to come to Australia? How do we create job creation? How do we turn around and say a migration policy that is more embracing of ideas that say things like, if you're coming here with a business idea that is going to employ 10 to 15 people over a period of time, right, why shouldn't you be, why shouldn't we be attracting people that are prepared to invest money and to create jobs here? Now,
I think that's a great point. Shane is in Liverpool and wants to talk to you. Shane, speak to Senator Sam Dastyari.
How you going? I just wanted to know, we're trying to save Australia and all that, and then you see so much land getting taken, and there's more houses getting built. I thought we're trying to save Australia.
Sam.
Well, look, the land use, we talked a bit earlier about kind of transport. Now, land use and transport are effectively the same thing. I mean, people try and treat them as different things, and they're not. Look, there's two issues there. I actually think we should be building a lot more houses. We need to be building a lot more houses because housing affordability is a joke. I've got a lot of friends in that who, effectively are now going to be destined to be renters for the rest of their lives because there isn't enough housing in this country. There's not enough housing in Sydney. There's not enough housing in this country to begin with. Housing prices are too high. That's separate from kind of what we're talking about directly here. But let's just take a step back and say, if you want to talk about the future, if you want to talk about, using your words, not mine, saving Australia, well, I'm going to tell you, the big issue that's coming is that we're not having enough kids, everybody's getting older, there's going to be incredible pressure on the healthcare system, incredible pressure on the welfare system, incredible pressure when it comes to things like the pension, and if we're not bringing in new people who are prepared to work, who are going to create new jobs for the future, we are not going to be able to sustain our current lifestyle.
I think you're absolutely right there, Sam. We've got George in Abbotsfield wants to talk to you, Sam.
Oh, hello, Sam.
G'day, mate. How are you?
Not too bad, Sam. Look, I'd like to put a different twist to this whole immigration discussion that we're having. Basically, I try to keep in tune with what's going on and the military side of as well. Now, America has sort of gone into Iraq and also Afghanistan, and including, when I say America, that's including the whole Western world. I think that what the whole world needs to do is actually, rather than let these people migrate to civilized countries, whether it be Europe, whether it be Canada, Australia, or all Western countries, we should teach them and we should migrate into the Middle East. We should bring our culture into the Middle East. We should take all our money to the Middle East, right, and build a democracy in the Middle East, rather than have it the reverse. That's what the government should be.
I think you raised some interesting points there. We've got lots of people want to talk to Sam. Sam, Phil is of Italian origin. He's from Haberfield and wants to talk to you.
G'day, Phil. Go ahead.
G'day, how are you? Look, I came out as a kid sort of thing and lived in Belmore for most of my life, a street away from the mosque. Now, we used to sort of meet on the weekends to play soccer and cricket. And I don't remember what day was of the week or anything like that, but we used to sort of, the guy who had the ball was one captain, and then somebody else would stand on the other side, and you keep picking plays until they all finished. And then one day, I just remember a group of guys asking us what religions we were.
So what's your question for Sam there, Phil?
I don't think he really understands, because from that day on, the division was they're Islamic and we're something else.
Phil, I think that's, look, I mean, I don't want to speak directly to your personal experience there, but that's awful. And that's completely, but that's completely...
Every park around Lakemba, we used to go, I mean, I can take you around, everybody knows me around there, I spent all my childhood there.
Yeah, we've got the story, Phil. Thank you very much, and that's interesting points you raised. Sam Dastyari, Senator Sam Dastyari, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for coming in today and talking about immigration.
Rowan, thank you for having me. And just as I go, I'm just going to say very quickly, a very good friend of mine, Hugh Atkins, marrying his fiancée Emma today, so I'm going to use this as an opportunity to wish them the best of luck for all the years ahead as well.
Fantastic. Best of luck to them, and best of luck to you, Sam, raising the issues which, as you say, both Labor, your party, and Liberals, you don't feel are getting to grips with. Good luck in the Senate. We wish to hear a lot more.
Thank you for having me, and always happy to come back.
And if you ever wondered, Sam, how interested average people out there in listener land were, just look at the number of calls we had off the back of your topic, your pet topic, which is immigration. I'll be interested to see your work in coming months. What's next?